You're listening to the Visibly Fit podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett, and every week I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a naturopath, fitness expert, and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in. Hello and welcome to this episode of Visibly Fit. I'm your host, Wendie Pett, and this podcast is part of the Spark Media Network that can also now be found on the Edify app, so go check that out. Hey, I am so glad you are with us today because I have a different show today, and I am excited. I am very excited because, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about how we have to condition our bodies to make it do what we want it to do. And sometimes we don't think of conditioning our bodies for just the kind of everyday kind of life things that we do as well. But I wanted to bring up the word conditio. Conditio, that's the Latin word for condition, and that actually means agreement. And so it's about getting your body in agreement for what you're about to take on. And we have to do that in all areas of our life. Like if you're going to go for, you can't just go run a race if you've never taken the steps to run a race and to build up and condition your body to do so, including your mind to run a race. You can't go and, I don't know, if you're a weightlifter, you can't go and just lift a bunch of weight if you've never started small. You have to condition your body, whether you want to do the splits, maybe you're wanting more flexibility, you have to condition your body. And that takes discipline, and it takes just simple actions. Actually, it doesn't have to be something big, but simple actions over time that are daily disciplines that get you to that next place so that you can run that race, so that you can do those splits, or so that you can garden. Yeah, that's right. You must condition your body to even garden. Y'all have heard me talk a lot about gardening, how I love to be outdoors and I love to be in my garden, whether it's my vegetable garden or my flower garden. And today I have such an amazing guest. She's a dear friend of mine. Her name is Michelle Riedel, and she is a 23-year master gardener. She is a writer, and she's also a photographer. She's done family photos for us. She's amazing. But she is a writer and photographer for the Northern Gardener magazine. And her gardens have been featured in Northern Gardener magazine. And in 2019, Michelle won one of 6 spots in the Minneapolis Star Tribune's Beautiful Gardens contest. I'm telling you, she has a beautiful garden. Now, when she's not teaching, she is a professional photographer that specializes in weddings, high school seniors, families, kids, and babies. But she teaches a lot on gardening and does a lot around the Twin Cities area. And I'm just so happy to have her on today. Welcome to Visibly Fit, Michelle Riedel. How are you, dear?
Hi, Wendie.
Hello.
I'm good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I thought this would be a fun episode because, as this episode is being launched, this is summertime and we're going to be going into the fall. And so I do want us to talk a little bit about fall gardening and that kind of thing. But I want us to first tap into, first of all, I've known you for what? I don't know, 20
1999.
years? What?
I met you in 1989.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so a long time.
Yeah.
So we have danced together and we've had fun with our girlfriends together, and she has just a love for people, and I've known her for so long and love her dearly. But she is a master gardener, and I love her garden, but I love the way that she has a passion for teaching others about how to garden well. And for me, and I know for you too, Michelle, there is such peace and joy. And yet it's work, and don't get me wrong, to garden, but there's such peace and joy when you're in your garden. And before we go into gardening, I want us to start off and talk about kind of what led you to figuring out I need to condition my body more to become fit to garden. And let's talk about that because you were in a place where you had back issues, you even had to have surgery, and we've worked together. You've worked with me with the Visibly Fit exercises. But let's talk about being fit to garden because most people don't think of that.
Correct. Yes. And I learned about it the hard way. I woke up one morning in 2015 and I couldn't move.
Mm.
My husband had to carry me out of bed and bring me into the living room. And I thought it was just aches and pains from the previous day. And it took about a month for me to finally see a doctor because I had him I had good days, but I also had some really bad days and I didn't really know what was going on. So I do recommend going to see a doctor
Yeah.
as soon as you can.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get to see a back surgeon right away, but I went into physical therapy, and it was one of, in an entire year, I had like 6 separate sessions of physical therapy, which was very, very necessary for me because fall was starting at that time in 2015, and I really, really needed to be able to get my gardening work done and get ready for the winter to shut everything down. So that's kind of my journey. It was from 2015 all the way into 2016. I saw a back specialist, then a back surgeon, had injections, and then finally I decided to see a neurosurgeon because I realized that I couldn't avoid the back surgery with physical therapy, and I really needed it. And it was a very positive journey for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And you
but
had
it has changed the way I garden, mainly because that neurosurgeon told me when he found out I was a gardener, because he was asking me questions about what I do, and I was kind of concentrating on the photography part of my life. And it was my husband who said, she's a master gardener. And he put his pen down and he looked at me and he said, okay, now I know what your problem is. Gardening. He said, it's the worst hobby for the back, just like golf is the worst hobby for sports. It's worst for the back. So
the back. Wow. Wow. And it's something
yeah,
that you love and you've been doing it for so long.
correct.
You teach on it and I mean your garden is so big and robust that it's not just you gardening, you have other people helping you with your garden
Correct.
to make it
Yes.
as
And that's what
successful as it is.
yes, correct. That's
Yeah.
that's what I learned, that I can't take care of. And I don't really have a garden. I have more of a paradise.
You really
Most
do.
people
Oh
have a
my
garden.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most people have a garden because it's a garden's easy to maintain. A paradise is not really that easy to maintain. And so getting extra help, I'm just very, very blessed that I have very good garden help that I can contact to, help me during the busy times.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so good, Michelle. And I know you dealt with a lot of pain for quite a while, and you did all that you knew that you could until you reached the point where you're like, yeah, I definitely have to have surgery, and there's no shame in that. It's like you got to do what you got to do. But the point is that you had already the damage was done. You had already done
Right.
so much because of the gardening and not conditioning your body to do the gardening. So there is
Yes.
a preventative way of gardening, whether it's a paradise garden or even like if it's a big vegetable garden or if you have lots of flowers, whatever, it's still that same bending over and stooping and spending long hours in a odd position and it takes a toll on your body. So let's talk a little bit about what you learned and how to prevent and also how to keep this from reoccurring in your own life.
Correct. So a really good warm up is important
Yes.
before you head out in the garden. But even for those of us, as you know, Wendie's from Minnesota, and so am I from the Twin Cities area, and we have a very, very busy, short gardening season. And I promote spending the winter getting your body ready for spring gardening. So a lot of people just like a week before, oh, okay, the weather's warming up, I am going to start doing my exercises, but that's not
Yeah.
the way to do it.
It's
You
like going on
really
vacation.
want,
People will say, "Oh, I'm going to hurry and go on a diet 1 week before you get in a swimsuit."
correct. Does it work?
Nope.
No, it doesn't. So, just you really want to go into the garden season strong and flexible, as strong and flexible as you can be. So, starting in January, February, even all winter long would be even best, just to really keep your body well conditioned so that you can do all that bending over and the twisting and the turning, which is what you don't want to be doing, which is why I got into so much trouble. And to just really try to keep your shoulders and your hips aligned while you're gardening, just even while you're doing exercises. I try not to even do too many exercises that really involve like a lot of rotating. I try to really concentrate on doing, if I'm getting ready to go in the garden, I know I'm going to be weeding on one knee, I'm going to be maybe doing some lunging exercises before I head into the garden. And if I know I'm going to be bending over and picking up bags of soil, or even picking up bags of mulch, I know that I'm going to need to be doing some stretches before I go out into the garden so that I can stretches for my back. So I know I'm going to be using my back a little bit more. And one thing that I learned from physical therapy, and I still do my physical therapy today, is the core really, really needs to be strong. And that's where you can find somebody like Wendie here to help you really get a strong, strong core. My core is a lot stronger than it was in 2015, a lot stronger today.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how much they use their core in everyday
Yes.
functionality of doing life, from gardening to, playing with your children and picking up their toys and picking them up, or whatever, grandkids. Like, people just don't really think of that. But a strong core means a healthier lifestyle and a healthier, more, um, body that will be able to do more things without getting injured. So one of the things that you mentioned in an article that you wrote is, I mean, I'm kind of wired in a way too, where it's like, I just want to get this task done. I don't care how long it takes me. I'm just going to do it. But you say to break up the tasks.
Correct.
And I think that that's something that probably someone listening, like even myself, needs to hear. Like, break it up. You don't have to do it all at one time, because your body needs a break. You need to stand up, you need to stretch, you need to walk about, you need to, give your body an adjustment. But I think if you're more type A, or if you're on a mission to get just this whatever thing checked off your list, it can actually be more damaging than good.
Right. Yeah. I try to spend about 15 minutes, because that, for me, that works. I could probably go a little bit longer, especially if I've had a really good warm up, or I'll just wait until I start feeling a little discomfort, and I'll do my bending over tasks, and then I'll switch to something standing up, like for example, maybe some of my pots need to be fertilized, and then I'll go back down to maybe working down on my knee, doing some weeding. I know a lot of people can't use their knees, and I'm really very thankful that I can. Or I might even set up like a little stool in the garden. I do have a stool where I can get to the plants a little bit easier versus like bending over on my knees. So I try to really switch up, as I mentioned, switching up your tasks is very, very helpful and important to keeping your strength up and making sure that you don't wake up the next morning with a sore anything.
Yeah. And then it could lead to injury.
Breaking up tasks, very, very important. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really about being intentional. That's what I'm hearing you say. You're very intentional and methodical in the next job that you're doing, so that you're like, okay, is my body going to be standing and stretching, or is it going to be stooping and bending over? What's it going to be doing? And so just having that variation is important. I'm a big walker. I walk around a lot. And in my neighborhood, just last month, I kept noticing this woman, and she was sitting in her front yard. She's got a huge front yard, but she was out there with a bag, and she was picking out like weeds, right? And she was just sitting. And every day that I'd walk by, I mean, I don't know how long she'd spend out there, but maybe it was just 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. But she took it in small little chunks. And I thought, wow, good for her. Like I'm just always on a mission to just hurry and get that thing done. But really, she's doing it the right way, right?
Yes, she is.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's so good to
good
hear.
observation.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
that's cool. Well, you are more flower than vegetable garden as far
Yes.
as gardener, but for 23 years you have been enjoying teaching and sharing the love of gardening. Can you
Yeah.
tell us maybe what your favorite I'll ask you your favorite flower. That may be a tough one, but I'm gonna ask you that anyway. So your favorite flower, but also maybe your favorite kind of class to teach others is?
Ah, good question. I I love zinnias.
Mm.
I will collect seed from them and then start them in the spring. And it's such a joy to get your own seed, start it, grow it. And I really like the tall zinnias, the ones that are like 3 feet tall, because I can start them in the spring and by the end of June, I've got flowers. And the zinnias are just really also great for pollinators too, because which is kind of an important thing to talk about also when
Very.
you're talking about gardening,
Yes.
is that they provide they have such a nice perch for birds,
Mm.
for butterflies, bees not so much because they don't really care, but yeah, it's just a great plant, and the birds love the seeds too. So I always like to leave some up over the winter for them to
Oh,
enjoy.
that's actually really cool.
So yeah, so zinnia is probably my favorite flower. Plus, it comes in a lot of colors and a
They're
lot of different
beautiful.
heights,
Hmm.
and it's one of the most talked about plants I think in my garden.
Hmm.
So
No, and they're so intricate, they're beautiful.
yes, they
Yeah.
are.
And is that what you like to teach about is how to grow
I teach a lot of different gardening classes, and a
and
lot of my
succulent
classes,
gardens and yeah.
yeah, a lot of my classes are based on articles that I've written. So I would say I'll talk about the one I like, and then the one that's probably the most popular. Most popular class that I teach is container gardening. So I have one coming up this fall, and then I also teach one in the spring. And it's all about design and then all the maintenance involved so that people don't think it's just putting plants in a pot and watering it and then, just maintaining it regularly. There's a lot of maintenance to it.
Hmm.
So that's my most popular, but I think the class that I really like to teach is a class on um, photography in your garden.
Mm,
That's my
of
favorite class
course. Well,
to
that
teach.
gets your
Yes,
two gifts and your two
yes,
passions involved together. I think that's
yes.
perfect.
And garden clubs really like a class that I teach on combining, it's container gardening class, but it's combining vegetables, herbs, and flowering plants. The
I
flowering
love that.
plants for the pollinators.
Yeah.
So to encourage pollinators to your pot, you need some flowers. And then also those pollinators will pollinate your vegetables and your herbs. So you get a
Yeah.
greater yield.
Oh yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
win-win right there. I love that. Even talking about having flowers within the confinement
Right.
of your vegetables and your
Right.
herbs, and I do that anyway. But I didn't
Yeah.
know. I mean, like I just did it.
Right.
I,
So
I
you,
kind of was doing it
right.
more to keep deer away, and then also to make it more beautiful. But
Right.
hey, I was doing the right
Right.
thing, and I didn't even
Yes.
know.
Yes, you are. And, just trying to find um, plants that have a lot of nectar in them. And you know what those are. All you have to do is just like look at your yard, look at the annuals, see what do the bees really like? What are the butterflies all over? And those are the plants that I like to put in my pots.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well,
Mhm.
for someone listening that may think, okay, wait, I really want to garden, but Michelle just said it's not that easy, even for little potted plants. So, what would you say to them? Because I want to encourage gardening because there is some uh, beautiful satisfaction out of that when you see your plant grow from a seed or even from a small plant that has already started, but just that satisfaction of wow, I assisted in this growth progress. What would you say that person so that they're not discouraged to start
It's,
gardening?
yeah. Well, I think number one is to really start small
Mm, hmm.
and become successful at small and then just adding on. and adding on and adding on, because it takes it can take a decade to really figure out how to garden, because it's a very, very frustrating hobby.
Yeah.
Um,
And depending on the climate you live in, and
that, and also the critters out there,
yeah.
they they ruin it. The insects that have come in, the Japanese beetles are
Oh, they're
big.
everywhere this year.
They are,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
They ruin gardening. The
Yeah.
rabbits, the chipmunks, the squirrels, the deer, they ruin it.
Yeah.
But if you can just figure out a way to, as I said, start small, start with container gardening. Container gardening is great because you don't have to worry about soil-borne diseases. You can custom place your pot, and you can put it up on a deck, so you don't have to worry about any critters getting to it. It's pretty much safe up there. Or you could put it up close to your house, where usually the deer aren't usually grazing. And yeah, just and then slowly add plants into your garden. If you're not going to have time, if you're not going to be able to um, yeah, donate time and just have a lot of pleasure just in it. If you don't think you're gonna have a lot of pleasure in it, because it's a lot of weeding in gardening.
Is there a
And
secret to that
really,
actually? Like
it's
to
just
lay down something?
it is. That's why you're down on your hands and knees. That's why you're sitting on a chair bending over. It's
But
the weeding that has to be removed in order
yeah.
to
But do
plant.
you lay down something, a covering? You don't.
Mulch.
Just some
I
mulch. Okay.
just yeah, healthy mulch
Okay.
is pretty much all I use. But yeah, and then just slowly start building out your garden, start planning them out. That's when I first started, when I first moved into my house in 1996, I really wasn't much of a gardener at all. But my husband said to me, if you do a really good job landscaping the front, you can do anything you want in the back. And that's how I got my paradise. So
Wow. And it is
but
beautiful.
I was slowly, and I think I recently wrote an article on mass planting, because it's a very easy way to garden. You don't have to buy a lot of different plants. You can just mass plant with like several plants of the same, and just really and plants that are easy to maintain. And I always tell people, like, if you're going to have somebody landscape your yard and you don't want to do a lot of work, ask for easy to maintain plants.
All right.
Plant
So since we're in
perennial plants.
Minnesota, like
Yes.
what are like your top three easy plants? I mean
Oh,
immediately
well,
I go hosta, or you
yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Right.
what?
Hostas are great. They
Yeah.
are easy to maintain.
Hmm.
But everything gets bigger.
Yeah.
Everything grows. I like really small evergreens. Those are kind of some of my favorites. I like grasses that don't spread, like Carl Forester grass, which is really good. I think it's University of Minnesota developed grass. That one doesn't grow really fast, and it just looks fabulous all season long. There's also a lot of perennials that, I don't want a perennial that I'm going to put in is going to spread. I also don't want to put a perennial in like some of the irises. They bloom for a week or two and then they're done.
They
Or
do.
plants like poppies, they bloom for 3 weeks and then they kind of die back and they look really ugly, and they pretty much you have to cut them back, or they'll just look brown the rest of the season. So it takes a long time to kind of figure out what those plants are. And I think talking to people, talking to master gardeners, getting master gardeners' opinions, doing a lot of online searches will also really help you find out what are those like really, really easy to maintain plants.
Yeah. And my listeners are all over
Yes.
the country,
I know.
and in different countries as well. So
Yes.
they really have to just dig in and find out what's going to fit their
Right.
climate and with their particular environment, because they may live in a home that has a lot of trees and it's a lot more shaded, or maybe someone has more sun than others. So you really
Right.
do have to do the research, but to really have the joy in the research, because like you said, it could be a lot of work, but if
Right.
you're going at it with a joy filled, like, I'm going to have a great experience doing this, and I'm just going to have fun instead of it being such a stressor,
Right.
because gardening is so, it helps, it can help you de-stress. Like when I go out to maintain my vegetable garden and my flowers, I just feel I
Yes.
mean, it's just really a great de-stressor, and I can go out for 10 or 15 minutes and then come back in and start to work again, and I feel like a new woman. So there's that to it. And so we want to have joy in what we're doing, and not feel like it's a burden. But like you
Right.
said, take it small and then build upon it. And so you have done that in your garden, and maybe you can send me a photo of your garden and I can post it in this video as well if someone's
Happy
watching
to.
instead of
Yeah.
listening. That'd be awesome. You're actually going to be teaching a class, and that's on September 15th. So if you're listening to this prior to September 15th, 2022, Michelle is doing an online Zoom class that you're going to want to check out. It is Get Creative with Cool Weather Containers. And she said that you can actually just email her. I'll put that in the show notes, but it's Michelle at riedelphoto.com. But you'll have the exact spelling in the show notes, so you can contact her there to find out more. And yeah, that sounds fun. Like, I want to do that. Definitely. That sounds
Yeah.
super cool.
And that is sponsored through adult education.
Okay. Okay. So
And,
good. They can find
yeah,
it in their
yes,
community
yes,
ed or
yes.
whatever.
And I will provide the sign up through just one particular school district that is working with a lot of different school districts.
Great.
I'm working with a lot of different school districts, but there are also some districts that are working with some out of Twin Cities school districts and
Okay.
sponsoring my class. So,
Oh, that's so
but,
cool. Well,
yeah,
that's
it is very
awesome.
nice.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And you,
And it's
I know
not
you're,
free. I just
yeah,
want to say it's not
yeah,
free
of
because
course.
the
It's a
school
class.
districts need to meet, school districts, community education need to
Yeah,
make
yeah. And
funds.
you're worth it too. So come on now. So, okay. So, what would you say to someone that as we're going into the fall, because, I've kind of been in this groove where I just plant in the spring and then I just let it go. And that's kind of my garden all summer. And then winter, I might get some mums, and that's about
Right.
it. Pretty
Yes.
boring. So, what would you say for flower garden? And then maybe we'll tap a little bit into fall vegetable garden if you're willing to tap a little bit into there. But flower garden, what would you say some of the best choices are here in the Midwest, because not just Minnesota, but the Midwest and cooler climates, to rotate out and get prepared and have a fall garden? What would you say?
I talk about garden or
Let's go
container
with,
garden.
yeah,
Let's do, yeah,
go with
probably
both.
container gardening because I think a lot of us, once fall starts, we're kind of ready to close out the season.
Okay, good. I'm
You
not
know,
the only one then.
because we've spent so much time maintaining the garden,
Yes.
and at least for me, I'm when the season's over, I'm pulling out all. I've got bulbs to pull out of the garden. I have annuals to pull out of the garden. It doesn't make any sense to leave them in there because they're not going to come back next year. So there's a
Right.
lot of work. So
And
what
wait, let me
I
put a
like
pin in
to do,
that real quick. So
go
with
ahead.
your bulbs and everything, so
Yes.
where are you storing that? How are you doing that? Um,
I
mhm.
am storing them in a room in my basement that doesn't get any light. And I'm
Okay.
storing them in containers that are not very deep. So they're very shallow.
Mm.
And a room that is cool as you possibly can get it.
Ah, see, good
That's
to
how I'm
know.
storing. Yeah. And when you store them, they have to be as dry as
Dry.
possible.
Yep.
As dry as possible. So I will leave them in my garage, sitting in the trays. And these are just the trays that I get at the garden center, sitting in the trays for a good month and a half before I move them
Okay. Okay.
into inside. And then I just pray that they come back next spring.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And do you have a
They don't
pretty,
always,
don't always, huh?
yes. No, they don't always, but I do have, I know the ones that are pretty much guaranteed to come back. So those are
Okay.
the ones I'm going to save.
And
And
this
I'm going to
is kind of
compost the ones
maybe
that
a
aren't going
silly
to work.
question, Michelle, but what's the longevity of a bulb? Like, what's the lifespan of as you as it blooms and then you bring it back in, you bloom, again next season? How many seasons typically?
It kind of depends upon the bulb. A lot of you buy one bulb, and at the end of the season, it has gotten bigger. It's got babies attached to it, so you can pull those off, and then you've got more plants. And so that's
Baby
why
bulbs.
in the springtime, you got baby bulbs. Yeah. So in the springtime, I'm sharing because I've got too many. So I love it when that big mother bulb comes back every year, because then it's just, it always have lots of babies, and then I can share. And if I lose it, it's okay. I still have the babies.
Yes, yes. Oh,
So
that's
back
cool.
to, back to gardening in the fall. I know that there are some plants that once we hit temperatures into the 40s, they're spent in my pots and in my garden. So that, for example, coleus, sweet potato vine are really common plants that we like to put in our pots in the fall, in the spring, and in the fall they've deceased. So I like to keep especially if all the other plants in my container garden look great, I'm ready to pass that container well into October. I even like to container garden through Halloween if I can. Up
Okay.
here in Minnesota,
Okay.
if I can. I like
Yeah.
to container garden for about 5 months. I want to get my money's worth out of the plant. So what I will put in is I'll go to the nursery and I'll pick up some kale, which is great for healthy
Aging.
eating. And also, yes, I know that you like kale a lot. I'll also pick up some chrysanthemums. There's everything that's in the nurseries that in September and into October are great for cool weather gardening. I want to say cold weather, but cool weather gardening that can handle temps below freezing.
Okay.
Pansies, if you can start pansies in the spring, if you can get them through the summer, because they really don't like to have a lot of hot weather and humidity. And then they'll freshen up in the fall. Those are also great for pots too. If I'm kind of on a budget and I don't want to invest in plants, but I might find a pumpkin that I could buy, I'll just put a pumpkin in place of the pot.
Oh,
In
that's a good
the
idea.
place of the plant in the pot, just to
Right.
make it, I want my outside pots to look very welcoming, because I have a lot, especially in the front of my house, and I want my house to look very attractive. And then once fall is over, I'm ready to container garden for the winter, and that's when I'm buying my spruce tips. And I have a lot of I'll cut plants from my garden and put those in my winter
Okay.
containers.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I'm
I don't,
gardening
you,
all year
yeah,
round.
you're definitely a master gardener because most people just think of gardening just in the spring and the summer, you know? So I love that you're always thinking about gardening, just like you're always thinking about a photo, right? Like, oh,
Right,
that'd be a good shot. Or that'd be, I mean,
right.
that's just your creative brain too. But I want to help encourage people to get that download from God, like our divine creativity, to let that just flow through and not be so hung up on how perfect it's supposed to look or whatever, right? Because sometimes I think that can keep us from doing the gardening or doing that photo shoot or whatever it is. But since we're talking about gardening, to even take a risk in a potted plant experiment, I would say just go for it because nothing is wasted, and you're going to learn from one season to the next. And so, yeah, just tap into that divine creativity.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to what we were talking about before about being fit to garden. I know I'm kind of going back and forth, but being fit to garden because you actually you had a mentor that was a little bit more mature in age, in her 90s, right? And
Yes.
she
Yeah.
was a master gardener, avid fit gardener, and she actually shared a lot about how to be fit in the garden with you as well, right?
Yes. Yes. Are you talking about the woman in the article?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Yes. Yes. She was
Yes.
91 years old, and she was a lifelong gardener, and she was a mother to a friend of mine. And she, even though she had um, lost her memory, she had Alzheimer's, the one thing that she always remembered how to do was to garden. She had to give up cooking and cleaning and reading and doing a lot of things that she loved to do, but gardening was one thing that maintained her and kept her going. So she has since passed away
Yeah.
since I wrote the article, unfortunately. And, and God bless her. She really was an inspiration to me because, if any of us lose our memory, one thing that maybe we'll still be able to do is our favorite hobby of gardening.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And she still was able to find joy
She
even
was.
when she was going through such a tough time. But
Mm,
it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful story and tough to hear as well. But um, I know she meant a lot to you, so I'm sorry that she passed. But I know she was a good role model, and she helps you see how to garden in a healthier fashion as well. So, you did talk about warming up, and I wanted to be clear on ways in which you specifically warm up. And in the article itself, you talk about doing some air squats, which I would call half knee bends with a Visibly
right.
Fit or whatever.
Mm,
You talk about doing some like just standing side to side rotations, 15 seconds of back, shoulder, and chest stretches with a rake or rope lifted overhead. Those are great things. I mean,
mm,
those are great things just to even start your day. Like there's an exercise that Todd and I both do, my husband, and it's really just to open up the spine, and we just put our hands up over our head and just roll over vertebrae by vertebrae until we reach the ground. And we do that about 7 or 8 times. And by the time we get to, number 7 or 8, we're literally putting our hands flat on the floor because you've elongated and you've stretched out the spine, and then you feel better and ready for your day. So those are
mm,
the kind of things you're talking about, right? It
right.
doesn't have to
Yes.
be something, like you're not going to go and do some big cardio workout. I mean, I guess you could, but we're talking about like simple steps.
Exactly. As
Yeah.
simple as possible. And just even like bending over and trying to touch your toes
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
just reaching up to the sky.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, just as many as you think that you need until you just feel like you can head outside and bend
Mobility. It's
over.
called
And yes,
mobility, functional
mobility. Very
fitness
good.
and mobility.
Mhm,
Yeah, that's so good. Well, you
exactly.
have been
Yeah.
through it, and you know from experience. And so thank you for sharing today, and thank you for sharing your love of gardening. Um, I think what I would like to ask you is maybe if there is maybe just one word or phrase or something that kind of sums up the entirety of who you are and your passion.
Um, that's really a good question. Um, I could share with you one of my favorite gardening
I
quotes.
love it. Let's do it.
This is by Bernard Shaw, I
Ah,
believe.
yeah. Uh-huh. George.
He says, the best place to find God is in a garden.
Yeah.
You can dig for him there.
Mm, wow. I love that.
I
No,
do
I
too.
absolutely love that. I,
Yeah.
yeah, and so true. I mean, I think how many times have I been in my garden full of joy,
Yeah.
and how many times have I
Yes.
been in my garden just weeping and duking it out with God about something, and he does. He meets us there. So that's
Yes.
beautiful. Thank you so very much. And those of you listening, if you are interested in her Zoom class on Get Creative with Cool Weather Containers, then check out the show notes and I'll have something there for you. And you can also email her directly. So thank you, Michelle. You're a blessing, and I appreciate you so much. All right. Take care. All right. Well, that was a wonderful interview with my friend Michelle. So thanks for tuning in to Visibly Fit. I hope this blessed you, and I hope it encouraged you to get creative. Get creative with your gardening, and to not just think of it as like I do, spring and summer gardening. There's fall, there's winter gardening. There's all kinds of ways that you can continue to bring in God's beauty into your home environment, right? Outdoors and indoors. But also there's fall and winter gardening with vegetables. And so there's another whole thing that we'll tap into, and I'll do an episode on that soon as well. But I wanted to tap into the flower part, and because Michelle knows her stuff, and I just want to encourage you to continue to plant beauty around you, because God does meet us in the garden, and He meets us out when we're out walking. He meets us where we are, but He shows us His love and His beauty in His creation. And so gardening is one of those things. I was thinking about Isaiah 61:11 actually, and the scripture says, "For as the earth brings forth its sprouts, and as a garden causes the things sown in it to spring up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring up before all the nations." And that's just a promise. That's just exciting. And I love that. And I thought it went really well with today's episode. But yeah, for as the earth brings forth its sprouts, and as a garden causes the things sown into it to spring up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring up before all the nations. That's right, righteousness and praise. So anyway, I hope this blessed you. I hope it encouraged you, and would love to hear your feedback on maybe some gardening. What are you planting this fall? What do you plant every year that just brings you joy? We'd love to hear about that. Comment on our YouTube channel episode here, or comment in social media. But bless you, and I appreciate you tuning in to Visibly Fit. We will catch you next time, same place. Well, whatever time that is you listen, but same place. And until then, God bless, and remain visibly fit in mind, body, and spirit. Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show, so thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com, and thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are, I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a visibly fit day.